Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and thank you for everyone online as well for joining. We're very excited to have this seminar. For those of you who don't know, we are the Riot, so me, Julius, and Camille, who's on holiday. This is a European movement, and we are the Riots here in Rotterdam, and our goal is to bring more reproducible, interpretable, open, and transparent science to the hospital. And today we are very excited to have Eduard Klapwijk to talk a little bit about his new project. He's a research data steward at the Erasmus University, and he has just received a fellowship from the eScience Center focused on reproducible coding. And he will talk to us a little bit, and teach about how we can make our research more open and how we can use data and code checks to create better research. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Yes, so I called this, or I gave it a subtitle, that, well, reproducible research, I think, is a basic cornerstone of high quality science, or at least it should be. Yeah, I will talk a little bit about reproducibility checks, but mostly about like reproducible research in general and how you can make your code more reproducible as well. The content of today is I will briefly start with getting on the same page. What do I mean with reproducibility? And we'll try to do a small thought experiment, hopefully showing or get us thinking about why reproducibility is important. Then I will talk about data and code availability and the concept of pre-producibility. So that's basically making sure that your materials are ready for being even reproducible. Then a little bit about code checks for reproducibility, and finally some tips for reproducible code. Okay, so this is a great little diagram, or even just a simple table from the Turing way. And I think it summarizes quite well what reproducibility is about. So it means using the same data and the same analysis to see if you can regenerate the results. I also really like the work of Lorena Barba, and she tried to, she did a great job in getting some clarity in sometimes confused terminology. So sometimes people talk about replicability and they mean the same as other people when they talk about reproducibility. But I like to stick to this definition. So reproducibility is taking the data, the original research's data, in computer code to regenerate the results. And then the difference with replicability is that in that case, the code and analysis is the same, but different data is used. So that's basically starting a new method of data collection or getting some other data and check whether you can find something similar using the same methods. But my focus today and in my project is on computational reproducibility. So it's really the question, is there enough detail to repeat the same study using the same data, using the same code? And of course, to be able to do that, the availability of data and code and methods are essential. They make recomputation possible. Okay, I hope we're more or less now on the same page, but what I mean by reproducibility. And now I want to do a little bit of a thought experiment. So think about the role of bibliographic citations in research. They have been around for quite a long time. They're very established, so there are many formal structure. There's like a formal way to structure your reference to another scholarly work with very specific formats as well, such as the well-known APA style, for example, with very detailed descriptions on how to structure a reference. And I would say this is a very successful little cornerstone of the way we do science and communicate about science. Because this formal way of citing other work really helps to build on the work of others. Okay, I think with the previous slide, I didn't really tell you anything new. So I think it's super common and well established to use bibliographic citations and to refer to other works systematically in that way. And of course, there are also problematic practices there. So some people might ignore certain authors or groups of authors, and it's not perfect, but the system of the citation, I think, really works well. But now imagine the situation when shortly after you publish an article, literature references are replaced, or we just use very casual mentions of other work, so in very varying, unpredictable, and incomplete formats. So if you state in an article something like, oh yeah, some article from some well-known professor showed blah, blah, blah. Or, yeah, that paper by Y and colleagues in, I don't know, some high impact journal. Or if your reference list looks like this, so you just say, oh, Johnson 2024, Nature. Oh. Nobody knows what you're talking about. Of course, this is not the way we do it, luckily not. And I think if we would do it like this, it will make it much harder to evaluate new work written in journal articles. And luckily, citing literature is a very common, well-established practice for researchers. So now compare this to the situation we have with access to data, code, and methods. And in many cases, it may not even be available publicly. Or it won't be for long. So in many cases, they won't be available anymore when I know the author retires or gets hit by a bus or just changes institutions. Supplementary material might also disappear. I've seen it happening a lot of times. Available upon request. Well, there are many articles trying to get back to authors and request data and code, and it seems to be very unlikely in many cases that it is or will become available. And URLs, if you did a good job and publish something on your own website or on a GitHub repository, those URLs might eventually disappear. My claim is citation is needed here as well. So citation to all the materials that led to specific research results. And this is my claim of the day. So here I will try to end this small thought experiment. So showing as detailed as possible how certain results were calculated should be as basic as correctly referencing literature. And I think as a whole research community, we should do better. And I think it also resonates quite well with this often quoted line by Buckheit and Donahoe after Claerbout. And most journal articles are not more than advertisements of something you did. So they say, said already a long time ago, an article about computational science is merely advertising of the scholarship, and the actual scholarship is the complete software development environment and the complete set of instructions, so the code which generated the figures. And yeah, I think we're still in the situation that these advertisements are shared. That's where you also get evaluators on. And in most cases, and the actual work is not being shared. But I also know to do it as well, it's arguably quite hard. So it takes some time to work on that, and hopefully focusing more on reproducibility and reproducibility checks can help with that as well. I think software code is really essential for science. computational methods really have transformed science. With the use of computers and software, lots and lots of discoveries were made. But we're still in a situation that it's not really reflected in the way results are generally reported and shared, because methods are discussed quite informally in papers. The code that produce the results is usually not available. And I think making this code available provides a level of detail that's much greater than the non-computational descriptions in journal articles. Data and software are essential parts of research, and also first-class research objects that, thanks to modern technology, can be shared with others. And others can also cite those objects as well. So that's also good news if you need those citations, and if you want to get the recognition for the work you did, that will be possible. Okay, so this is more or less the same argument, but another way to picture the current situation. So we tend to focus on the PDF. We use the paper to share research results, but it's much more interesting, I think, to share those materials, the messy worlds in the lab. But this is a problem because, to get results in a paper, you can go from data, materials, codes, everything there to the paper. But it's very hard if you only share that paper. You cannot go back to the actual work that has been done. So it's some sort of inverse problem that is unsolvable when you only focus on the PDFs and the articles. So hopefully, this is a good case to share much more of that on that side. All your data, if possible. Of course, there's sometimes constraints there, but at least the materials and the codes and maybe some toy data, if that's the only way, so that others can really see what you have done and build upon that as well. Okay. I've now said many times that it is important, but some more reasons, I think, to work reproducible are also selfish reasons. So there's this nice little paper from Markowitz, already from 2015, called 5 Selfish Reasons to Work Reproducibility. And it's a bit of a funny article, and says like, most of us are, or most of you are in science for the glory and for winning. And if you want to do that, you should work reproducible, because it will save you a lot of time once you do it. It's also good for continuity. So if someone else needs to continue your work, you better work reproducible. And it's also good for your reputation, because you can show like, oh, this is actually what I did. You can check what I've done. If some problem arises once you've published your work or at some other point, you can also correct it much easier if you have a reproducible workflow where you can just rerun your analysis quite easy. So I think reproducibility makes you win the science game. And I would also say it brings us closer to the truth. I know not everyone agrees that scientists really look for true knowledge, but at least I would say we try to build accurate or reliable knowledge. And of course, it's possible to have totally faulty results that are fully reproducible. But if it's not reproducible at all, we cannot even evaluate the claim to truth. So reproducibility is a minimum necessary condition for a finding to be believable and informative. And also, if you make your materials, your data codes available for others, then it will allow for the evaluation of the weight of the evidence much more quickly and reliably if you do so. And it is also the way that errors can be caught and later corrected. So I think, it's a very good way to improve self-correction, which is a hallmark of of good science, of good research. Okay, oh, this is also, I thought I'm here at the medical center, so I should focus a little bit on the importance in the medical field. So this is already from 2016. So this was a reaction to some controversial paper for which the authors were not willing to share data and code. So Ben Goldacre wrote a short letter saying that, if just everyone sending in papers to the British Medical Journal would share their analytic code, then at least others could check it. He also said, I like that as well, that it would be enhancing even more than only transparency and reproducibility. It will also create a nice code or an archive of codes, and then other researchers could learn new techniques, reuse that. So I really like that notion, also underlying that of science as a communal effort. So we build something together and build on the work of others. But then, one of the most baffling reactions imaginable was that this is bad science to share your code. And now I think there was also a bit of a pun here, because Ben Goldacre had written a book called Bad Science. But still, if you're interested, the original author said, like, no, I don't need to share my code, because first of all, someone else already replicated my work, and second, it will be lots of pages of information, so that's too much. Then there was another reaction, quite to the point. I think that that's an irrelevant argument, because it's not a reason not to share your code if it's a lot of code. It might be even a better reason to share it, because the more code you have, the more likely it is that it contains some errors. Anyway, this was a bit of an aside, but I think the point for now is that all major journals, including medical journals, require now sharing of code when you submit your article. Not to say that most people do that, but at least it is a requirement. And it's also a requirement for most funders that you share as transparently as possible the code that led to research results. And I think it's also, if you look at the Netherlands Code of Conduct for Research Integrity, I think it also follows that you should share your code. So I think, one more argument to make your code at least available, and once you do that, I think you better make it reproducible, is that it's just an obligation for most researchers. Okay. Now a little bit about reproducibility, and that also relates to the question about reproducibility as transparency and reproducibility as really the recomputation of the results. So reproducibility was a nice neologism from a statistician called Philip Stark. And he said, like, you should try to make your experiment or your results in adequate detail for others. So make it reproducible. So you're not yet sure whether it is reproducible. That's maybe for others to check. But at least the first step is to make it available for others in the most detail possible. And he also made a nice analogy of that the current common practice is, more or less a partial list of ingredients that is usually shared, but you need the full recipe to really see whether something is reproducible or not. And if someone else then tries to follow the recipe, but does not get the same results, then the result might be incorrect, or your recipe was not precise enough. So I think that's also a nice analogy to keep in mind, especially if you like cooking. So there are two questions here. So the first question is, are the data and analysis laid out with sufficient transparency and clarity that the results can be checked? So that is reproducibility. And then the second, so in a lot of people, when they talk about reproducible research, they talk about this first question. So it's just research that's capable of being checked. But it can also be referred to in the second sense. So if it's checked, do the data analysis offered in support of the result, in fact, support that result? So that is more, the difference between these questions is the action of another person or another researcher. So the first is about, is the code available? And the second is, if it is available, is it really possible to recompute the results? So is it really reproducible? And this brings me to the rationale for reproducibility checks, because if someone is actually going to check the results, then I think, first of all, that helps to succeed with reproducibility, because you have to make sure that it is available and readable and useful for others, your code. And secondly, someone else then really can evaluate the accuracy of the results. Okay, I got this eScience fellowship already last year, so I think I'm more than halfway through. And what brought me to that is that I work as a data steward at the faculty for social and behavioral sciences at Erasmus University Rotterdam. And there also a lot of people do quantitative work. But if I look at my field, so social and behavioral sciences, in general, I think best practices for scientific computing are not really widely adopted. So luckily, data sharing is more and more becoming the norm. People try to do that. But then sharing the associated code is still less common. I think it's partly due to a lack of training, also high reliance on graphical user interface programs for data analysis, so where you point and click instead of writing code. And I think there's also some sort of a culture of sharing code is missing. So a lot of people are afraid that others catch or might catch errors in their code. I can understand it, but on the other hand, I think as a researcher, as a scientist, you should also embrace that. I think if someone else is able to catch an error, that's great, because then we have this self-correcting part of research in action. So what brought me to this project is that I think more researchers need experience with sharing their code and also checking actual levels of reproducibility of their results. So the idea was to focus on this basic level of computational reproducibility. So if someone publishes a result, can someone else then, using the same data and code, reproduce the results? Well, my plan was to establish a workflow in which me or other researchers perform a reproducibility check for data and code before a result gets published. Sorry. So the idea is that the researcher submits their data and code to the checker, and then the checker tries to first find his way around the data and code to see if they can produce the same numerical results. And in my experience, this is usually harder than expected. So there's always something not working, or I don't know, missing, or but that's good, I think, because that means that then using some kind of checklist, the checker can provide an actionable list of improvements to the researcher. And at some point, once the code is reproducible, the checker can also publish a report. And then the researcher can reference that report in their publication. This might be still an optional step, but I think it's nice. I recently also did that, and I will tell a bit more about that. But if you can show in your article, like, okay, one basic form of reproducibility was checked by someone else, so my code is reproducible. I think that's nice to show. Of course, this is definitely not an entirely new idea, and I try to build on great examples from CodeCheck, ReproHack, also very nice organization. And also at the University of Sussex, they even hired an independent statistician to perform these reproducibility checks at the School of Psychology. So for every article that is published from that school, yeah, they provide this check and publish a report. Yeah, so the benefits it brings, I think it ensures a basic quality level of your results, because you can show that at least someone else checked whether it's computationally reproducible. I think it also helps to improve the actual analysis code, because in many training sessions, I think it's sometimes hard to generalize that to the actual work of the researcher. I hope it also lowers the barrier to share analysis code with others. So it hopefully also encourages researchers to share their code. And it can also take place in a safe environment. So if you forget about publishing that report, that's also another option to do it. That's also something I'm trying to figure out with researchers at my institute, what they like. But then it can also normalize mistakes and correction in a safe environment, because you do it before someone sends it out to the wider world. And with the feedback to improve the code and data documentation, I think it will also create a demand for more rigorous reproducibility practices and more training. So that's more or less the idea behind these code checks. I was still finishing some of my own research projects last year, so I thought, like, okay, that's a good opportunity to submit my own work to the test. So my co-authors and we took many steps to make this project as reproducible as possible. And I thought, let's submit the work to the CodeCheck community workflow. So if you go to codecheck.org.uk, you can request a CodeCheck for your work, and they will find volunteers. So I'm currently also one of the volunteers listed there. And he asked, like, oh, do you know a little bit about this field of study? Do you want to do a check? So via that workflow, I submitted our preprint, submitted the data and the code. Just had to adjust my README a little bit on how to run the code, so make sure that people really understood what they had to do. And then an independent checker reproduced the work, and I was very happy because it was reproduced, and we got a certificate. So what this basically means, that one person at one moment in time, or an extra person outside the research team, was able to reproduce the work. So it's not saying that, oh, it will be reproducible forever, but at least it's much better, I think, than most research that's never checked by someone else independently. If you want to read a bit more about the process, I wrote a little blog post on the website for my project. On how the experience was, and I really enjoyed it. But in the end, there was also we did some workshops with the CheckNL team. So that's basically a group of people who are trying to use this code check workflow in the Netherlands in workshops. So it's a live code checking experience, and usually the authors are present, and that's quite nice because they then can help people who are doing the check to explain what they actually meant, because there's always something that goes, or not always, but in a lot of cases something is not clear or something goes wrong. And I have to say, that's also what I wrote in this blog post, that in the end, the whole process of reproducing the work is not really exciting because, well, you will stumble upon some problems, usually about software dependencies. But once you get it running, then it's just the machine is running and you see hopefully more or less identical pictures showing up. Like it's in some way exciting that you see, oh, someone else can reproduce my work, but that's about it. So it's still a basic check, and it might, of course, be much more exciting to look at replicability or generalizability or robustness of work. But I think it's a good, low level to start. So most issues with dependencies, and once the code runs, it's not that exciting. But discussing it together, like ways to make things more reproducible, that is exciting, I have to say. Okay, that brings me to my last bit about some tips for reproducible code. And my first tip is start writing code for your research, because maybe you are doing your analysis in other programs, and some people go even as far as saying that GUI-based image manipulation and spreadsheets, so GUI-based is just clicking point software, that they are the enemies of reproducible research. Because having to click exactly as someone else is not only annoying, but also error-prone, of course. And working directly in spreadsheets is also error-prone. So they might be fine for data entry, but not for data manipulation and calculation, because they conflate the input of data, the output of data, code also sometimes, and presentation. And maybe also even further down the line, there are some very well-known but persisting problems in the genetic literature where automatic date conversions leads to erroneous gene names. And there are also famous economic papers, I think, that just due to a bug in Excel, were not reproducible. So better start writing code, and doesn't have to be very sophisticated, I have to say that. But if you code, at least someone else can exactly see what you did and try to rerun it. And of course, working reproducibly and learning new tools is not easy. But I think being partially reproducible is better than not at all reproducible. So better start with something small and maybe try to make your next paper or project a bit better organized or a bit more reproducible than the last. So I think that's very good to keep in mind, because it can be very daunting if you want to do everything perfectly. Probably if you start with it, that's not possible. It's not trivial. So some people say, well, computational reproducibility is too low of a bar for scientific research, but there are many examples where attempts to reproduce results initially fail. And I really like this picture. It's an illustration in an article about the 10 years reproducibility. 10 years reproducibility challenge. And they tried to go back to old code and see if they could rerun it. And you see it's like some sort of archaeological dig into old code in the digital age. And sometimes if you look at old code, it might feel like that. So just like archaeological data, chances are quite high that you only will get a fragmented depiction of the work. So I just added that because I like the illustration. Okay, some more tips. So I think the one of the most important things you can do to make work more reproducible is to add as much documentation as possible. So a README is something to start with. I like this website, makeareadme.com, and they say, because no one can read your mind. So yeah, they should read the README that you are writing. But it also goes further in writing down all the steps that were taken to process your data, to analyze your data, and write it down in scripts. That's also what I mean by documentation. Well, we already talked about it, but avoid manual steps that are harder to reproduce, and really explain what steps are needed to reproduce the results. So try to make the code understandable, add comments, explain the decisions made. So here's an example from a code snippet, and so this upper line is a comment, and it's just saying, oh yeah, we do this because we regard temperatures below 50 degrees, minus 50 degrees as measurement error. And then someone later can see, oh, that's the reason why they did it. So it's just a simple example of how you can explain what you did in the code so that others can understand why you did it. Dependencies. So codes often depend on other codes that depend on other codes. So it's ongoing. Oh yeah, it's now a little bit missing, but I like this image as well, or cartoon, basically, so that a lot of digital infrastructure is yeah, building on other work, and sometimes only one person is maintaining it, and if it gets lost, then yeah, the whole thing might collapse. Well, I think we have to deal with that, but the thing that's in our hands that we can do is make sure to systematically list all dependencies, so all the software that you used and all the packages that you used. And there are also very nice tools to create time capsules. So you have Docker or RN for pip or Conda. And what they do, and I think that's really nice, is they help to define and to record those dependencies and their versions. And in many cases, they also help to isolate environments. And they are very useful because they help you make sure that you know your dependencies. But also, if things go wrong, you can always delete and then recreate the whole environment. And that's much easier than debugging. So it also means that the more often you recreate your environment, the more reproducible it is. So there are tools for that. Tools for version control as well. So usually your data and your analysis code change over time. And at some point you want to know what version of the code was and what version of the data was used to produce a particular figure or result. And if you have your data, code, figure files under versioning, then you can always go back. And you can look, if you add comments in the version history, you can understand what changes were made or why a specific analysis was run. Because yeah, the later the longer the time, the more time there is between actively working on the project and going back to the project, the more you forget. And versioning is really a great way to deal with that. You can do it by creating multiple versions manually. That's usually okay for text or presentation documents, but not very practical when a lot of files are changing. So version control is a systematic approach to versioning, and also when you collaborate with others, that's a great way of dealing with different versions and changing environments. So Git is free and open source. It was developed by the team of Linux developers around 2005. So it's mainly developed for software development, and it allows to have multiple local branches, and you can work in parallel. So that's very nice if you work with other people and you work in complex settings. The files are kept in a repository, and then the users clone copies of the repository for editing, and then they commit changes back to the repository when they are done. So there's, I have to say, a bit of a steep learning curve if you start to use Git and GitHub, for example. But it's very useful if you work with more complex software codes. Use reproducible workflow tools. So you have tools like Quarto, R Markdown, or Jupyter, and they can be used to write complete manuscripts, complete books, complete websites. And what they do is they help you to share code and text and output all in one document. And it really helps to clearly describe the steps that were taken to process and analyze the data. So here is a screenshot from a recent paper, also the one that I got code-checked, which was written in Quarto. And we were able to publish a fully reproducible version of the manuscript as a website. So we refer to that website in our paper, and other readers, other researchers can see exactly how all the figures were produced in that paper. Yeah, then finally, if you're ready for it, publish your code. And one thing you need to do is then add a license to your project so that others know how to reuse your code. Otherwise, it's just copyright protected. So you need some kind of license if you want others to reuse it. So make sure you use a specific software license. This will help others to build on your code. You can choose a license, for example. You can choose then a permissive license. That means that yeah, everyone can do whatever they want with the data, but you can also, or with the code, sorry. Or a copyleft license, which is a great way that you ask people to only reuse it in an open way. So it's like the opposite of copyright. And also get local support, for example, from your library or your legal advisor or data or software steward, if you yeah, want advice on what kind of license you should use. And if you publish your code, also add information about how to cite your project. Just write it in your README, how you want others to cite your project. And then also add a citation.cff file. So that's the citation file format. So it's a plain text file with human and machine readable citation information. So yeah, that's a great way to make it very clear how people should cite your code if they want to reuse it. And then if you publish your code in a repository, so not only on GitHub, but also, for example, on Zenodo, then your project will receive a persistent identifier. And that's yeah, very important to avoid link rot. So that same link will always lead to your code and will also make your project more fair. And there's also quite an easy way, if you already publish your code on GitHub, to publish that GitHub repository on Zenodo. So it's just a small extra step. And then finally, if you're ready for it, if you worked hard to make your research reproducible, then definitely have it code checked. So this will boost the credibility of your work, and you can show that, well, you're not the only one who ran it, but someone else also checked it. And it's also good that errors are checked at the right time. So if you do it before you submit it to a journal, then you still have time to correct yourself. And that, yeah, you know, that's a result that is trustworthy is published in the literature. Okay, if you want to learn more and do it yourself, then in a couple of weeks we will have a free workshop at Erasmus University Woudestein campus. Here's the link if you follow the QR code, and maybe it will also be in the chat. But it's together with a research software engineer, Sven van den Burg from the Netherlands eScience Center, a whole day where you take your code and we work together to make it more reproducible and to make it more reusable. So there's still some places left. So yeah, feel free to register, and it's going to be fun. There will be lunch and drinks as well. Okay, so this is my last slide, some conclusions. So yeah, my claim is showing as detailed as possible how certain results were calculated to just be as basic as correctly referencing literature. But I think before we get there, we should work hard. Try to make reproducibility a habit, but also remember that being partially reproducible is better than not at all reproducible. And have your own work checked, and also check the work of others. So I don't know, if you are asked to review a paper, just ask for the data and the code, or volunteer as a code checker, for example, in the code check initiative. Thank you. That was it. Okay, on time, I think. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions. Yeah.
Okay. I think we have a couple of questions online, so maybe we can start with that, and then if you guys have questions, the floor is yours. So I'm gonna. Oh, and thank you so much. And the course was really cool. I attended, so I highly recommend.
Okay. Nice. Thanks.
Okay. So we have a couple. We have a couple of questions. Oh, okay. The first was is. You mentioned original authors had some non-arguments for not sharing code.
Yeah.
Then there were 2 arguments for why it is bad science to share code. I don't think you mentioned them.
Oh, okay. I try to mention them, but maybe not very clear. So I think if you go to the slides, you can also even click and read them, but I will try to reiterate them. So the first was, yeah, it was also a bit strange, but they said like, well, we don't need to share our code because someone else already replicated our work, so probably with new data. So that was their first reason. Cannot make more of that. And the second one was that, yeah, but it's very complex and there will be pages of code, so we cannot share it. So yeah, that was their argument in the British Medical Journal. So.
Okay. I think it's clear.
Yeah.
What they're. The second question here is, you mentioned you can now cite first-class code objects. Do you have examples?
Yes. So I think the general example is if you follow the tips and you write your code and you publish it in Zenodo, for example, that makes it possible for others to cite it. So that's still not saying that people do it, but especially for people who work a bit more on methods, I think there are many examples where specific methods in specific fields are published, and then when people use those methods, they cite the software code. So
I've seen a lot of times people really referring to the GitHub where they put like
yeah.
the original, and then in the GitHub created version, there is also the GitHub of the first one.
Yeah.
This is usually how I think.
Yeah. Yeah, but I would then say it's okay to link to the GitHub, but it's even better to have it on Zenodo, because GitHub is also a Microsoft product, so maybe at some point they, I don't know, want to take it down, then all the links are gone, or or if just the author removes it, then yeah.
Right, sure, that's what I expected.
It's
It's the person.
Okay.
And then we have one last question, and then someone also shared a similar initiative. Maybe we can.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the name of the initiative?
The Cascade
Cascade.
Initiative.
Okay.
CASCAD.
Ah, yeah. It's vaguely familiar. I'll check it out. Sounds good.
Well, if someone else wants to. It's also. So one last question here. I think plenty of people will agree with the ideals of reproducibility by available code and data. Could you give an overview of common places where it is done? GitHub for code might be obvious, yet what about data? Hosting large data somewhere for non-technical groups is not common practice nor their expertise and will bring resistance even if they agree with the ideas.
Yeah. Okay. Where to start? Yeah, I think so maybe the simple answer is like code usually does not contain any, I don't know, privacy or other sensitive information. So code you can always share. I think there's never really a good reason not to share it, unless I don't know you want to copyright protect it and want to make money out of the software you're building. But yeah, for data, I think it's more complicated. So I think there the being as open as possible and closed as necessary is just the way to go about. So I think, yeah, what I usually advise researchers if they have sensitive data is that they try to at least share a summary of the data or anonymous versions of the data. So yeah, I think especially in the Netherlands, in the last couple of years, there was quite some investment in, for example, data stewards who can really help you with finding the right solution. So maybe the short answer is, yeah, look for your data steward who is really happy to help you with finding solutions for yeah, how to share your data and also how to share your code.
I think especially the medical field sometimes it's a no-go really. GDPR.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So GDPR is, but GDPR does not really mean that you can never share something. So with the, you of course have the, yeah, you heard about the FAIR principle. So making data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. That does not equate with making all your data openly available. So if you start by describing your data in an accurate way and publishing the descriptions of the data, that's a first start. But I think, yeah, at least other researchers should be able at some point to have a look into your data and should be able to verify your results. So that might also sometimes mean that you publish a description of the data, and when someone really wants to check it, then yeah, some kind of data usage agreement should be set up, and they should be allowed to look into your data. Because yeah, I'm going back to this quote of otherwise it's just advertisement of your work, right? You could, of course, it's good that people trust each other, but if you always say no, there's no way that others can under certain agreements look into the data. Yeah.
Sometimes I guess you can also publish some refined version of the data.
Synthetic is also an option.
Or not
We're not.
yeah, no.
I don't think there's a good reason, but still, like,
Because for instance, I've seen,
policies that you.
but with, for instance, fMRI, I see people sharing the like only the networks that.
Yeah, so the more summary statistics.
You know, something that already went through some process, but at least it's like a middle ground that from that point on, you maybe are able to.
Yeah.
I don't
No,
know.
that like if you remove any
Yeah.
Provisionally you can share it, but otherwise you cannot. But then I wonder, like, it's like code check.
Yeah.
If you need to share the data.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I know that at some places there's, so that's also what I try to do at my faculty, is to have this internal system of code checks, and that of course circumvents the problem that you cannot, because there are sometimes reasons that you cannot really share your data outside the hospital. So yeah, my idea for Erasmus MC would be to set up such a system within the hospital, and then that's already. It's not fully independent, but at least it's much better than just doing stuff on your own.
I have 1 minute, but I think that I don't know if anyone has any questions or comments or.
I was just curious, how long did you?
Good question. Fine. It took me quite some time to. So my own code check, that was very fast. It was nice because I was. I had a revision deadline for the paper, so I already said to them like, "Oh, is it maybe possible to do it within 2 weeks?" And I think they managed to do it in 2 or 3 weeks. So it can be quite quickly. And I'm now also doing a code check at my faculty, and I also said like, I'll take 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But it can be done in a couple of hours. So the actual work of the checking, but yeah, finding the time. No.
Companies.
For you.
Yeah.
It doesn't go anywhere. Yeah. I mean, yes.
Yeah.
I think you need the PIs to
Aware.
like enforce it, because like, you know, young researchers are, oh, yeah, let's do this, but then like PI will not die. Move on.
Yeah. Coding, but
Hmm.
cool.
It would be.
It would. So if anyone else has a question.
Otherwise, thanks so much, Edward.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.